All right, hey folks, my name is Dave. Welcome to NTD Racing. If you have been watching my last couple videos, we were using BendTech and a whole bunch of other things like Race Aspirations and Fusion 360 to build the roll cage for our next race truck. We're calling it Lefty. It's going to be a budget trophy truck. Today, we're taking all that stuff we've been doing in the last 3 videos and we were at BendTech and we're going to cut all of the tubes. So in this video, first let me take a couple of minutes to show you how we plan to cut the whole thing out. Then let's get inside onto the Dragon 400 and start cutting out the tubes for our next truck. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. And before we can just drop all this into the BendTech, one of the Dragons, we need to do a couple things. First, I'm gonna take a look real quick on some of the things that I changed from the last time I made a video. We'll look at Fusion 360 here. And so here was the whole chassis that we're building with all the tires on it. And so in part 1, the video I have for BendTech, you saw me just make the regular roll cage and make that, basically comply with all the rules that are like score and all those other things. Part 2, we did the front suspension and the whole front of the chassis. And then part 3 was the rear of the chassis. And then something I came through and changed was this member right here. And if you remember, it was vertical. And something I just totally forgot to add in there is that, as that rear suspension swings in the vertical, it's going to basically, obviously it's on an arc, and I just kind of calculated for going straight up, but it's traveling at an arc, and so as it strikes this member right here, which is holding that bump stop, so the bump stop's here. I reoriented, canted this piece right here 10 degrees forward because that'll make it easier to make a mount for the bump stop. I just make it in line with that tube. And then also it travels in because it's almost, it's almost a 5-foot long trailing arm. And so it travels in almost 2 inches. So I basically move that node in 2 inches so that when it hits it square and it makes it easy for me to make a mount. So those are the changes that I made for that. But going back over to the BendTech, now, I'm totally happy with the way the design is. We're ready to cut these parts. But what I need to do first is I need to cope all of the ends. And so the way that I am going to do that, and there's probably a bunch of different ways to do it, but here's how I'm going to do it and try to organize it in my brain, is I'm going to follow a couple simple rules. First off, I'm generally going to be working from the floor to the ceiling. And I want to kind of start with some flat parts, some parts that I can lay down on my fabrication table, which I know is perfectly flat, fabricate them perfectly flat, and then mate them to other parts. For example, I'm going to call these things bulkheads. I'm going to call this one right back over here, just the rear bulkhead right behind the field tech. I'll probably start with this one too, because in my mind, this is the least consequential. I'm going to practice welding maybe in a month or 2 or something like that. I'm going to practice all my welding on this one. And then I'm going to move forward to this one over here. I'm going to make this one. And then I'm going to make this one right back here. And this is the big critical one. I want to make sure that my welding is all dialed in. I'll make that whole one as one whole part. And then for that, really maybe the whole front suspension is going to go in as one piece. So I'm going to actually build this whole thing and actually put in all the A-arms and everything, steering, and then I'll finally put that on there and weld it and tie it into the rest of the roll cage. But starting with that, and then the other rule I'm going to follow as I do this thing is you have a lot of tubes that kind of come together. You kind of see these tubes all come together. Anytime I have tubes coming together at the center of the vehicle or in general, is I will always make the one on the driver's side continue all the way to the part. And what do I mean by that? If I go to cutting, so let me see, pick points, just because it's easier, I think, if you use pick points when you go to cutting. And I say, I'm going to make a new cut, and I want to cut this tube right here, and I'm going to cut it in relation to that one. And now you can kind of see where I'm going to have this tube right here, which is on the driver's side, and kind of hard to really tell in there. On the driver's side, that one will be continuous. I'm going to complete that cut. But when I do a new cut over here, and for this tube, now this tube is going to have to be cut in relation to this one, and then also this one, which will already be there, and I'll complete, and you'll kind of see now how it's going to cope it to both of those tubes. And that will be my general rule all the way across, just so I don't forget, I get over here, and which side do I do it on? I always make the driver's side one continue all the way forward. And then how do I do the rest of these? You got to go from the back of the car to the front. How do you keep track? You can go one tube by tube. That's fine. That'll work. Another thing I found kind of works for me is, especially as I have maybe one of these really complex nodes right here where I have a bunch of tubes coming together, is I'm going to start with the first tube that goes in. I'm going to cut that one. I'm going to go all the way across. What I mean by that, let's say, for example, I'm going to say a new cut. This tube's going to be continuous all the way across, but this tube will be cut in relation to this tube and this tube. And that's how that one's going to go in there. I'm going to complete that cut. And now you can kind of see the miter right there. And then after that, I'm just going to continue all the way across the node. I'm going to say a new cut, and I'm going to say this one. And by the time I put this one in, this one will be there, that one will be there, and that one will be there. And I'm going to complete that cut. And I'm just going to go all the way across. And I'm going to do that. I'm just going to say all those tubes will be there. And I'm going to say complete that cut. And then now it'll always have that cope. Now realize that this tube will never actually probably touch this tube. I put it in there anyway, just in case. You never know. Here's one other thing to look out for while you're doing this. I'm going to say pay attention to this piece right here. You kind of see how that kind of comes up and it goes over there. So there's this piece right here. Let's say I mess something up with my selections over here. And I say I want to do a new cut. But I turn this on right here where I say ignore tube ends and ask me how I know I've messed this up before. And I'm going to say, okay, I don't want to cut that same piece. I'm going to cut this piece, and it's going to be cut in relation to all these and this one over here. And then now watch what happens when I say complete. Do you see how that piece is now missing right there? And what's happened here is since I said ignore tube ends, it basically said this tube right here continues out in space forever, and it cuts that piece. And so later on, when you come to weld that on there, you put that tube up there, you're like, oh my gosh, that piece is missing. Where did it go? Like, why did it make that cut right there? Well, it cut it in relation to that one. So just make sure you don't mess that up. Anyway, so I just say always keep that thing unmarked unless you intentionally want to mark it for some reason. So there is that. Okay, then the final piece is there's in this cut, I think 100, 110 tubes or something like that, and you're ready to send it off. How do you know? You got all these cuts right here. How do I know what's what? How do I know I got all the right ones? And sometimes BendTech, the software is amazing. Sometimes you'll see a couple things. You're like, you'll have a couple tubes maybe named the same thing, and it's kind of weird, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, you can go back and figure out what it is. If you got one tube that's 114 that's 3 feet long and one that's 6 inches long, you know which one is which. But in general, though, you want to keep them all organized. And so how do you know you have them all? This is, I'm not sure if anyone else does it this way. This is how I do it. So I have this file in here, and I've got it saved on my, as called Lefty. This is one that's going to be going to BendTech. This will be the final iteration of this. I'm going to go ahead and save, again, I'm going to go save as, and I'm going to open up this file again, but I'm going to call this one is BendTech, and I'm going to call it delete. Hope I spelled delete right. Not the best speller. Good at math, bad at spelling. Anyway, so now this one is called, let me see, assembly, Lefty BendTech delete. So I got that one. Now what I want to do is I want to go back over and I want to open that assembly I just had, the Lefty BendTech assembly. Here it is. I'm going to open this one back up. And now it's going to open two folders. So I'm going to have both of these things open at the same time. And what I want to do is, so this one is my final one. I don't want to mess, I'm ready to cut this one. I think I am at least. So I don't want to mess with this one. I'm going to just use it so I can manipulate it. And then there's this one behind it over here, and I'm going to move it over just so I can kind of see the window. And what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to end up going back and forth between these two. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go again to, I'm going to start with pick points just so it gives me this presentation as opposed to this presentation, which I find just makes it easier for me to see what I'm looking at. So I'm going to go to pick points first and over to cutting. And then I'm going to select a specific cut. I'm like, okay, there is straight number 7. So what is straight number 7? I come over here and I'm looking for the green tube, and here is the green tube, which is straight number 7. I say, okay, in accordance with my plan on how I'm going to cut this thing, does that cope look right to me? It is only terminating on that one, and it's in relation, all those tubes will already be there, but the only one that really matters is really this one, which will make it cope to. That looks good. I check out the other side, and I say, okay, that side looks good. Now straight number 7 is good. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this file over here, which is my delete file. I'm going to select delete up here. I'm going to scroll into that same tube, and now I'm going to delete it. And now what I do is I just go back and forth, and I find the next tube, and I say, okay, number 9. And once I decide that number 9 is a good tube for me, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to delete number 9. And when I get all the way through my entire list, and I have QC'd, every single one of the copes, and all the tubes are right, if I come back over here, then all of the tubes should be erased. And if I still have one there, then I need to come back over here and figure out what did I miss on that. But that's one way for me to kind of just go through methodically and make sure I got all the copes correctly. Because you know, one of them's wrong or something like that. You have one of these copes, you thought you had it right and you didn't take a good look at it, and it's wrong. It's going to cost you, I don't know, 10, 15 bucks or something like that to make another tube. And if you do a bunch of those errors, then obviously the price adds up. So it is worth taking the time to do that. Okay, and now is the cool part. This thing is ready to go. Take the files. Let's go ahead and sit down with the guys at BendTech, figure out how that whole Dragon Cam software works, and then start cutting out some parts.
All I'm doing is hitting transfer.
Yeah.
You have Dragon Cam down here.
Okay.
And once you click on it, it'll open up Cam, and then there'll be a couple of boxes that come up.
So is it basically going to open up Cam for that assembly is what it's going to do?
Yep, so you won't see it as an assembly after this point. It separates it into the individual pieces, but then you also, like, this is how you nest it together. So you'll have 3 different nests. Okay, so this is the 4x4. So you would just do new nest, create a nest out of this. And then pops up 2-inch DOM, so we'll nest that. Yeah, so if you have your machine settings, so under actions here, like my part ID is set to engrave. That's the font size. We can go a little smaller if we want to. I usually do 1/2 inch. The round pipe, we would just run 45 amps and then change your feed rate for each material. Yeah. So that's a 20-foot stick. You need nuts to cut those 4 parts.
At the top it tells you your stock remaining and your usable and whatnot.
Oh, nice. Well, it didn't take long after sitting down with these guys to see that the software was really powerful. And this Dragon Cam software comes with the Dragon machines. And I'm going to show you later on in another video some more stuff I found out about BendTech. But just here, I was really impressed with how easy it was to use, easy it was to mark the parts for assembly afterwards, and then also a couple different techniques to just basically save material. And, you know, the tube is still expensive now. They have a bunch of ways that they can save the material and put the most cuts into one piece. But from here, let's go ahead and take it over to the Dragon machines and show you how everything is cut out. All right, check out, this is called the showroom. This is where we're gonna be doing all the cutting. Right now what we're getting ready for is we're gonna set up, this is the Dragon 400, and we're gonna dial this one in, calibrating it on the 4x4 inch tubing we're gonna be cutting. Over here is a Dragon 250. We'll be using that probably a little bit later on, but this is the really cool part, is this is what a trophy truck looks like. This is Lefty. All you gotta do is assemble it. There's a bunch left to do before we get to that point. Let's go ahead, start with the basics and get this thing calibrated over here and get ready to cut on the Dragon 400. So I'm going to do my best job to try to describe what I think is going on in the calibration. I think I've got this after watching it this one time. Is first you chuck the piece of material in there, and it has to be about, you know, a 3 to 6 foot piece of material for your first calibration, just because you don't want it any sagging anywhere as you get this really accurate calibration. And then you tell the machine, let's check out the torch height. So the torch drops down to all 4 sides individually. And the torch drops down and the computer says, I think I have dropped down, let's just say to the fire height. Let's say we're gonna fire it at 60 thousandths of an inch. It drops down to that. But then you get your filler gauge and you slide it underneath there and you say, you put in the computer, no computer, you think you're at 60 thousandths, but I just measured you're at 40 thousandths. And the computer goes, okay, I can adjust for that now. And then you do that on all 4 sides and you tell it what the measurement is from what it thinks it's at to what it's really at. And then you run a cut profile and it's going to cut some squares. And the computer says, I think I'm cutting these squares in the center of this piece of material that you just gave me. And you go in and you cut it out and then you measure all 4 sides and you say, no, computer, the box that you have cut on here is, you know, maybe 1 inch from this side and 1.25 inches from this side. So I think I put it in the center. So now the computer adjusts itself, and that's how it calibrates itself. And now it knows where it is completely in relation to the flat sides and also, more importantly, the corners, such that it can maintain its torch height as it goes all the way around the square tube. I think it's really slick on how that works. Cool.
Those values.
So this is where all those values are going into. You see basically the torch height over here. These are the offsets he just pulled off of that piece we just cut. and that will be permanently saved. So next time they come back in here with this piece of 4x4 square tube, they drop it in there and all that's in there and it's ready to just plug and play. Really cool. All right, this is a pretty big deal. This is the first tube of Lefty to be cut. So this is what we got. This is a 4-inch by 4-inch square tube. It's chucked in this thing. It should look a lot like what a lathe looks like. Now, if it's a round tube that's smaller than 2 inches, it could pass all the way through. But this thing is chucked centered up in there. This thing is enormous, and it goes through this piece over here, which centers it. And then what's going to happen is they're going to mark it first, and then the torch is going to come down and cut this thing. And I would tell you, something that would take me all day to do for each individual part, let's go ahead and watch and see how long it takes to cut each piece. All right, so it took just about 4 minutes to cut this. And if you're a fabricator, how do you do this? Like, how do you cut this out? This would have taken me days, and I would not have been able to hit these holes as accurately as they did in just 4 minutes. This is so awesome. I cannot wait to put this truck together. Let's go ahead and cut some round tubes. All right, while this thing gets to cutting, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about. First, I've been asked a couple times, do you cut these tubes, or does BendTech, can I send them my files and have them cut the tubes? First off, I don't. I am one of the luckiest guys on earth. I retired from the Air Force after 21 years. I work at an airline now as a pilot, and NTD racing is something I do because I totally enjoy it. Making these videos, I really enjoy doing that. So I don't do production stuff. I do one-off things. And so just be lucky enough to be invited by BendTech to come to their shop and cut the tubes for Lefty on so many levels is just amazing for me. One, just to see the machines, and then two, everything I make is generally one-off. And it's like driving a car that you made for the first time or anything. I just love doing those kinds of things, and I just don't get into production. Does BendTech? I don't think that they do either. I don't want to speak for them, but I don't think that they get into this kind of thing where you send them a file, they cut it, they send you a pallet full of tubes. They sell a bunch of these though to folks. I'm sure that there are folks out there that do. If you are somebody and you're watching this video and you do that, please put your information in the description below, how somebody can contact you so we can do that. I'll also ask BendTech if they have resources for how you can do that. And then a couple of things you're watching while we're doing the work here is, why are they moving the tubes? Why are the tubes getting put in and they got to be moved and all that? This is their showroom. And so these are just machines that they use to show people how they work. And they run into OSHA issues with this building they've got, because they had a building, they were putting a machine there, and they have a door on both sides. They could put an 18-foot machine in here. You can see the segmented pieces in the video. And if you were buying one of these, you'd want probably a longer one, because we're cutting in this video 21-foot tubes and 18-foot. So we got to move the tube and cut. But I will tell you that the guys who are using the machines are so good at this, and the software is so good that they can cut, stop, move the tube, and then cut again. They could even cut, mark the tube, flip the tube over, rechuck it, and then cut the other side. It was really usable, super trick on how this whole thing worked. I am going to do another video. My next video, I went through the whole place and I was like, how can I be most useful to the people who are watching my videos? And I think that what I will do is I'm going to show you from, the first time you search BendTech and you click and you find their website, to the purchase, to the instruction on how to use it. And then a year or two later, when you have a problem and you call back, who are you going to talk to? What does it sound like? What does that whole process look like from my perspective? I'm a consumer, and not from their perspective. And I'll make a video on that. So in case you're interested in buying one of these, then it just maybe will make that choice for you a little bit easier. I will tell you that you'll be impressed as much as I think I was. And then the final part, I've used BendTech before. I think the reason they contacted me originally was because I built HONCHO. It's our original race truck, using the BendTech software. And I spent, I think from, it was like July or something like that, until November, designing, cutting apart manually. And if you go back and watch my videos, you can see how long it took me to manually cut all the tubes. And there was probably about the same amount of tubes, over 100 tubes that we cut. And then translate that to this, what you're seeing going on here, where you see on the top right, there's that big pile of tubes that is rapidly being eaten up by this Dragon 400, and then the pile of tubes on the floor there that is rapidly getting larger, and it is amazing. And it took me from July till November. We literally, with these guys, worked, and we didn't need the whole crew there either. We didn't need all of us there. Probably been by one person easily. We worked through all of these tubes in cut time, about 3 hours of the machine running. Now, there was a little bit set up and those kinds of things, and then there was time for me to do the design, which I took a couple weeks to do. But you can see how much time it saves you putting one of these into your plan as far as production goes. Such an amazing machine, and I just so glad they invited us out there. We had a really good time and appreciate it, and just want to say thank you to all the BendTech guys who hosted us and were just so generous with their time. And I really think we made some friends out there, and can't wait to see you guys. Hopefully you guys will join us out in Baja this year, and we'll see you out there with Lefty.
Really cool thing about the water system, you just grab it. There it is. Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Well, you just saw it. We did in about 3 hours, which literally took me like 4 months the last time we did it. That was amazing. And I will tell you what, working with the guys here, huge thanks to Dalton, Jared, Son, Jonathan, and also Chris, Mike in marketing. Those guys were just so great to work with, and we do appreciate you spending all the time with our team. So you're not going to want to miss what we got coming up in the future as we get all those tubes back into our shop and start putting Lefty together. Please consider hitting the like and subscribe, ringing the bell for future notifications. Also, leaving a comment definitely helps us out, and we do appreciate it. We will see you in the next episode. Take care of yourself.